Alright, welcome back, guys. This is the real part 5 of making a chef's knife. So we have an 8-inch aeb-l chef knife. Just finished up grinding on after heat treat there. So basically I have the blade down to its appropriate thickness. Okay, I've actually finished one side, so this is the result that we're looking for. Okay. Up to 1,000 grit with buff with the green rouge, some fingerprints on there, but actually have a nice satin polish or satin finish there. Should look pretty sharp when we're all said and done. So my current setup here is basically just a little piece of 2x4 on a clamped into a vise. I will go ahead and put just a rag down so I don't scratch up the side that I've already finished. You could tape it up or whatever, but I decided that rag's going to work just fine. Might have to go back through and touch it up with the buffer or something along those lines, but we'll worry about that later. So in the meanwhile, you want to make sure that you clamp it down nice and snug. Okay. Now on my final grinds, I actually took it up to 220. So you're going to go back through, and you could start with 120. Like I think this is probably pretty good for 120. But just for giggles, I'm going to do a quick pass with some 60 grit sandpaper that I have, and put just a little bit of WD-40 on there to kind of help it out, help the sandpaper along. And basically at this point, I'm just going to do nice, even horizontal strokes there. So we'll get that WD-40 spread out. And then at this point, I want to kind of erase any remnants of a plunge line here too. But I'm just going to keep going back and forth, and my goal is to get rid of all those vertical grind lines, and then just keep working up. So the key is you want to finish whatever grind lines you have on there. Remove them all before you jump up grit. Alright, because obviously with the higher grit sandpaper, the harder it is to remove any of those grind lines. Okay, so that's why I'm just going through here with the 60 grit just to remove any of those deeper scratches that came about during the grinding. And again, if you can go the whole length of the blade, that's ideal. You might want to get yourself some tunes and or video or any of the above while you're doing this, just to kind of occupy your time, because this is some seriously tedious stuff. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just keep working up with my grits. This is going to happen for probably the next half an hour or so. One thing I will say though is get yourself like a little block, piece of aluminum, steel, whatever, just something that you can actually wrap your sandpaper around, which will give you some good sharp edges, but also for this flat grind, I want all of my sanding to be very flat. Okay, so I don't want to dig out a canal or anything like that in the blade, because say I was using my thumb or something like that. On my smaller blades I might just use my fingers or my thumb to apply pressure. But for these larger blades, especially the large flat grind ones, I want to use something to aid in keeping it sharp, or keeping it flat. So again, we'll keep working. All right, keep going back and forth the blade, trying to cover as much ground as possible. Change your sandpaper out immediately or often. All right, once it gets a little bit dull, just flip to another side or move it on up, because you're just going to end up doing a ton more work trying to save 2 cents of sandpaper. As far as the type of sandpaper I use, I usually just use either the Harbor Freight or I really actually like the 3M stuff from Lowe's. Seems to, they say it lasts like 7 times longer than normal sandpaper, but I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, because it's super hard metal that you're grinding on, and honestly no sandpaper is going to last against that anyway. Alright, so I'm going to pause this for a minute and come back to it in just a second once I've worked up some grits and we can kind of see the progression here. So hang tight and I will be right back. Okay, so at this point I'm basically up through 120 grit. Okay, and if we wipe this off, you can see that basically we've removed all vertical grind lines. All right, and pretty clean up here at the plunge. Still kept this area here flat for the bolsters. All right, but we got all of our scratch lines going in one direction here. So at this point, I'm ready to work my way up to 220 grit. Okay. Now at this point, I actually switch over to this little apparatus here. Okay, it's just a piece of like acrylic bar with a piece of leather on one side, and then like a piece of foam on this side. For the 220, I'll usually use the leather side. Okay, and that just gives it a little bit of give. All right, it helps you get a nicer finish. Okay, so again, process still exactly the same. All right, just keep going, covering as much of the blade as possible. All right, and you want to remove as much of your 120 grip marks as possible. Now, what a lot of guys do, and I don't necessarily do this, but they'll actually come at an angle. All right, they'll make scratch lines in a different direction. Okay, so that way when they come back through with, say, a higher grit, they come back through with the 400, they'll go a different direction. All right, and that will remove all of those scratch lines in the other direction. I guess maybe I'm a little bit more old school. I'd normally just go back and forth until I feel really good about the finish. So again, just keep working on that, and then I'll pick it up for the final grits. Alright, so at this point I've worked up through 220 grit, and again, just coming along, gotten rid of all the 120 scratches, and she's starting to have a bit of a satin shine on it. So basically at this point, my little apparatus here, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the foam padded side, which is going to do a little bit more give when I get to the 400. So now at this point, I want to be a little bit more deliberate with your strokes, all right, and make sure that You get nice even passes on it. Alright. You want those long lines. They're going to show up a heck of a lot less. Alright, you don't want those little swirls in any particular area. But basically just go the whole length of the blade, the whole way back off the end. You don't so much have to worry about rounding stuff off with the 400 grit. And again, once your paper goes dull or gets clogged up, just switch it out and keep on working up. So I'm going to finish this up with 400. I'm just going to do one piece of this, and then I have some 500, and then I'll go to 1,000. And then we'll finish it off on the buffer. So I'll show you guys when I go to the buffer here. Alright, stay tuned. Okay. So at this point, it's up to 1,000 grit. Feeling pretty good about it. Little spots here, but basically the secondary bevel is going to take care of those anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. Plunge is more or less taken care of, but it matches up with the other side, so I'm not too worried about it. So we got basically both sides, okay, and at this point I want to take it over to the buffer just to do a finishing buff on both sides. I'm going to wipe it off, make sure you get rid of any kind of debris, just because last thing you want is putting some nasty 220 grit or something along like that into the buffer. So I'm going to try to do this one-handed, which is probably a terrible idea, because buffer's pretty much super dangerous. But with that being said, basically just keeping it below the center line on the buffer. Alright. And now with the green rouge, that is it's not a scratchless rouge, but it's super fine, so put a little bit more of this on. Apologize for the shaky video here. Alright, so basically got it all buffed out on the first wheel, and we'll just knock off any of the excess rouge that's still on there. Get that final buff. I'm going to be real careful with these buffers, especially in the areas here. Catch like that. And if you don't have a good hold of the knife, it'll fire the damn thing across the room. Or if you're stupid about it and you do it up top like this, it can fire it into your belly. Though this knife's not sharp, it's grind down to very, very thin. And that could be bad. Alright. So at this point, feel really good about the finish of the blade. Alright. Hey, how you doing? Alright. So at this point, next step's going to be cleaning it up, protecting the finished portion, and then attaching those bolsters. So, alright, thanks guys.